Hello. Today we're going to review the 7 fundamentals of firearms. It's stance, grip, sight picture, sight alignment, trigger control, breath control, and follow through. That's all 7. The first one we're going to start with is stance. And think about all the 7 fundamentals of working from the ground all the way up to breath control, sight picture, and sight alignment. So we want to start with a good foundation, which is stance. A good stance starts with feet about shoulder width apart, then your dominant leg about a half a step back. Ideally, you want your toes pointed in the direction that you're shooting if you're stationary. So your hips are squared off on your target, your shoulders are squared off on your target, so you have the most muscle relaxation possible. Once you've got your feet shoulder width apart and your right foot back, now we want a little bit of nose over toes. And all I'm gonna do is lean into it so that my big toes are digging into the earth and I can feel a little bit of pressure on my big toes. That way, I've got recoil management in the front and not across the center line or back. The worst mistake people make is they stand tall, and as they begin to shoot, recoil management happens back on their heels, and they're trying to find the follow through, which is the last step. So, my feet are about shoulder width apart, my right foot's back, and now just a little bit of nose over toes. I don't want to bend at the butt. I don't want to bend at my legs too much. All I want is a tall stance, break my knees, so I got some circulation, nose over toes. That's a good shooting stance right there. The next fundamental is grip. It's equally important as trigger control, and we're going to talk about later on that grip and trigger control account for the biggest shooting errors that most shooters see on any given day. So when I begin to grip my pistol, I think about having a big hand, a wide hand to grab my pistol. Because oftentimes people get a small grip and they'll reach down, grab that pistol, and then have to make a quick adjustment to get to the top of the tang of this pistol. So think about having a wide hand. I don't have to look at my pistol. I'm right down here. Right now I can feel that I'm on the beaver tail of my pistol. I make a quick adjustment. My grip is nice and solid. It's a high grip across the tang and the beaver tail of the pistol. I seal the deal. That's a low grip, and so when the pistol begins to shoot, it recoils, and then I recoil, and eventually I come back and I've got a worse grip than when I started. So a high grip sealed that deal with my dominant hand. Now, I want to get my dominant thumb up in the air so where I can create space for my support hand to follow through with a good support grip. Think about having your thumb parallel with the lower receiver, and I want to take the back of this knuckle of my support hand and bring it to the front of the knuckle of my dominant hand. And I would never do this with a loaded pistol, but I'm sliding my hand across there so there's knuckle to knuckle. Now I've got a solid grip all the way around my pistol. My grip is grabbing with my palms and my fingertips so I can fight recoil management right out here in front of my pistol with a little bit of nose over toes. Some people will have their thumb down there and it looks similar, but it's not the same because now my thumb is capable of overriding the slide stop lever. If my thumb comes all the way up my support thumb, it prohibits my dominant thumb from overriding my slide stop lever, and it also provides greater symmetry for my grip, which is super important. So when I grab my pistol, I'm nose over toes, my feet are about shoulder width apart, my right foot's back, I can feel my big toes digging into the earth. My support hand comes up here to marry or to meet with my pistol close to my body so that I'm not bringing my pistol out in front of my support hand. It's here, my pistol comes up, it's flat, I've got a solid grip, I'm under the beaver tail, my hands marry, I've got my right thumb up, I feel knuckle to knuckle. Now I bring that pistol straight up to my face, and my grip and my stance are perfect and ready to fire. Okay, so far we've gone over the 2 fundamentals, which is good stance and a good grip. Now we're going to put 2 more fundamentals together. We're going to put in sight picture and sight alignment. And we're going to talk about it in the context of red dot shooting, and then I'll segue over to iron sight shooting because it's slightly different with sight picture with iron sight shooting as opposed to red dot shooting. So sight picture and sight alignment go hand in hand simply because of this. My sight picture is what I see downrange, and what my sight alignment is what my iron sight or what my red dot is pointing towards. So when I press my pistol out, because I've got a good stance, I've got a good solid grip, I press my pistol flat out, I bring it up to my face. My sight picture right now is the flashlight on my phone. That's the sight picture that's in focus. That's the target that I want to shoot at. Sight alignment happens in the heads-up display of my pistol. There's a red dot in the center. With red dot shooting, it allows my focal plane to stay downrange. So my sight picture and my sight alignment all happen in one focal plane, which is exactly downrange. So I'm looking at my target, my pistol comes to my face, I find the red dot, it's lined up on that flashlight, and that's exactly where that bullet's gonna go once I squeeze the trigger. Opposingly, iron sight shooting, sight picture and sight alignment are slightly different. When I point my iron sights downrange, I have to stay focused on the front sight. So I stay focused on the front sight, I line the front sight up with my rear sight. So my rear sight is slightly blurry, and my target is slightly blurry as well, because I can't focus on 3 different focal planes at one time. Essentially, the most important focal plane for sight alignment is your front sight. So as I begin to squeeze that trigger, I have to trust that what happens downrange is exactly where my front sight and my rear sight are lined up. The front sight is a post, the rear sight is a notch. I want to line the front post up in the notch so that it's equal left and right, and it's exactly flush with the top of the rear sight. And so it takes longer for me to find that front sight picture and the sight alignment, because inherently most people want to look downrange and see the results. So I've got my eyes up, I'm on the front sight, my nose over my toes, my target's blurry, my rear sight's blurry. I crack that first round downrange, and people will look up or they'll look downrange, and they'll continue to shoot downrange with the focal plane downrange. So their sight picture and their sight alignment is happening downrange, and their pistol begins to move just slightly. And because they're not focused on the red dot, their shots are off. So red dot shooting, sight picture, and sight alignment happen downrange. Okay, so we've already gone over the first 4 fundamentals of shooting: a good stance, a good grip, sight picture, and sight alignment. Now, let's talk about trigger control. Trigger control and the grip go hand in hand because they account for the greatest amount of shooting errors on the range. So let's talk about good trigger control. We're going to make sure, first of all, that your weapon is safe and empty. I'm going to lock my slide to the rear. I'm going to check my magazine well and my chamber. And I'm going to look away, and I'm going to check it one more time to make sure that my pistol is safe and empty. Now, I've got my trigger, my hammer locked to the rear, and with striker fired pistols, your pistol is already cocked and ready to shoot. When I put my trigger finger on the trigger, I get the center of the first digit, the first pad, in the center of the trigger. I don't want too much, that's too much finger, and I don't want too little finger. I want a little bit of overhang right there on my trigger. With striker fired pistols, and this is a 1911 style, I like to keep my finger a little bit closer down towards the trigger guard because there's better leverage and I've got more tactility when I reload or reset my trigger when I'm shooting multiple shots. Now, once I've got my finger pressed on the trigger, think about having Elmer's glue on your hand and it begins to dry. And what you're trying to do is rub that glue until it gets into a nice little ball so you can drop it into the trash can. Once I feel that trigger and I'm attached to it, I want a smooth press all the way back as if I'm rolling that glue all the way off my finger. It's a press and it's smooth. It cycles, it's a press, and it's smooth. What happens with most pistols, it cycles back, your finger wants to reset, and someplace after it resets, you want to maintain positive control on the trigger with your trigger finger. A lot of people come off the trigger to reset it, and when they come back on it, it's a heavy snatch of the trigger. And for right-handed shooters, we call that the 7 o'clock push. It goes low and left. For left-handed shooters, it's a 5 o'clock. And at 3 to 5 yards, that snatch right there is about 3 to 5 inches. If I double the distance, I actually multiply the error, and I'm someplace around 12 inches low and left. I double the distance again, and I literally can be missing the target and hitting the dirt. So when I place my finger on the trigger, again, half that pad is right across the trigger. I touch, and I'm smooth on that squeeze. It recycles. I reset that trigger. My finger never loses contact with the trigger, and I begin to squeeze and roll that glue one more time. Nice and smooth. Good trigger control. So far, we've gone over 5 of the 7 fundamentals. We've gone over stance, grip, sight picture, sight alignment, and trigger control. Now let's talk about breath control. Breath control is how we're breathing in specific shooting environments. And for close range shooting, non-precision shooting, you want to breathe naturally. Just an open breath. You want to make sure that you keep your brain and your eyes oxygenated. You don't want to hold your breath too long. You begin to starve your body and your brain of oxygen. And then your aperture and your sight picture begin to get a little bit blurry. The target looks blurry sometimes. Your red dot looks blurry because you're holding your breath. So breathing naturally, and sometimes if you're running down the course of fire, deeper breaths in, and prior to getting to your final firing position, take some deep breaths and get those exhales nice and smooth. And once you get stopped, you start to breathe naturally. For long distance or precision shooting, you want a natural respiratory pause. And there's 2 ways that I've learned over the years. The first and most common way is to take a deep breath in, let half of it out, and then you've got 3 to 5 seconds to shoot that round until you have to get another natural respiratory pause. Around 45, 46, 47 years old, I learned that I was beginning to starve my brain of follow-up shots for precision shooting. So what I started to do was take a deep breath in, I would hold it, and I would shoot my multiple shots with a full breath, because now I've got more air and more oxygen that's feeding my eyes, feeding my brain, and feeding my body of the necessary oxygen, because I got a little bit older and I got tired more quickly. So that's the 2 different ways of breath control: breathing normally on the range and trying to maintain good pulse and good breathing, or natural respiratory pause, whichever works best for you. So that's 6 of the 7 shooting fundamentals: good stance, good grip, sight picture, sight alignment, trigger control, and breath control. And the last one is follow through. And follow through is super important for subsequent or follow-up shots. What happens in follow through is this: I've got a good stance, nose over toes. I drive my pistol out and I shoot that first shot. My pistol cycles and it causes energy to the back of the pistol, and that pistol naturally wants to recoil. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we mitigate the maximum amount of recoil to keep the pistol flat and either stay on your front sight or stay on your red dot on the target exactly where you want to fire. So follow through means this: I've got one sight picture, my shot breaks, there's a little bit of recoil, and my follow through is I want a second sight picture for every shot. So it's sight picture, bang, sight picture. That's follow through. I'm ready for my second shot. So how do I get good follow through? Good follow through happens with a good stance, nose over toes, and a solid grip with my wrists. I want to begin to grab strong enough equally with both hands so that I can maintain positive control of this pistol, so my grip with both hands doesn't change, and I have just enough strength in my wrists and my forearms to keep my wrist from bending and keep my body from coming back. Also, trigger control can play havoc on follow through. If I'm heavy on that squeeze, follow through happens here and right back up again. So my pistol comes straight out, I find that target, my finger goes on the trigger, I've got a solid grip, I find my first sight picture, bang, and I'm right back on it to find my second sight picture for my next round that I'm shooting.